Hi. So wonderful to be here. It is about 2:30 a.m. in Alaska. My current position right now is that I'm a digital media specialist for Arctic National Wildlife Refuge. My job mainly is to document and provide science communication to the entire world about what's going on the refuge. We are the largest wildlife refuge in the entire country of the US. And you'll probably see us in the news quite a bit, but we are home to about a little bit over 200 species of birds. So I always like to say that all roads lead to Arctic Refuge. So all birds that are in the Western Hemisphere go to the northern slope of Arctic Refuge to breed in the summertime here. So there's a really amazing field camp that it started in 1979 on the Canning River, where every year for about 3 months out of the summer, it's a short summer for us, we have biologists come from all over to study the nesting and breeding habits of the birds that come there, and monitor how they have been kind of progressing throughout the years and seeing if there's anything in terms of climate change that's changing their behaviors. And that's been one of my projects recently is to document the life and work up there, and work on the nest cams and the transmitters for locations. Yeah, it's wonderful to be here.
Well, thank you so much, Sarah. That is fantastic, and for us here in Mandurah, in such a very different climate, but also a part of that ancient flyway, we're just so pleased to be connected with you. Our next presenter, wonderful to have Gab Mejia. Gab is a Filipino nature conservation photographer, and he's also an environmental storyteller. Those stories are so important. He is a National Geographic Explorer, Nikon Asia Ambassador, and an Emerging League Fellow in the International League of Conservation Photographers. He covers stories on nature, wildlife, travel, and culture. Gab has published stories on National Geographic, CNN, Nikon, and Worldwide Fund for Nature, the United Nations Development Programme, and other international platforms. Gab is also the co-founder and the Communications and Outreach Lead of Youth Engaged in Wetlands, the global youth network advocating for the conservation of wetlands. Gab was honoured in the Forbes Under 30 Asia list. He's also 2019 Jackson Wild Media Lab Fellow, and Gab is also a weekly writer for the Manila Times and has presented stories for several TEDx talks for his love of nature and the arts. Gab, it's our privilege to be sharing this with you with all the experience you've had. Thank you so much for joining us. Please give a warm welcome to Gab.
Hi, thank you so much. It's such a privilege and honor to be here, and I'm so grateful, to share this short but sweet moment with all of you here. My name is Gab. I'm a conservation photographer from the Philippines, and I am the founder and communications and outreach lead of the Youth Engaged in Wetlands. So my work is relatively on, photography, documenting migratory birds in and around the Asia Pacific, the East Asian Australasian Flyway, but also telling stories of people, of culture, on the interconnectedness and the intersectionality of the environment with us humans. I could share a short photos of the work that we've been doing in the Agusan marshland. So this is the largest wetlands in the Philippines. So this is actually the youth organization that we worked on in 2018 during the Ramsar Convention on Wetlands. We're a group of young people from all over the world who is starting to mobilize youth to engage in the mission of the Ramsar in protecting and conserving wetlands. And one of the projects that I actually did with National Geographic was really documenting the lives of the indigenous communities, the people, my fellow Filipinos who have been living in the Agusan marshlands, which is the largest wetlands in the Philippines. And they are called the Manobo Tribe. And the photo here is Babanto. So she's been serving and protecting and conserving the Agusan marshlands for almost 20 years. And her story hasn't really been told on how they actually coexist with the wetlands, even with the migratory birds, considering it's the Philippines as one of the mega biodiverse countries in the planet. So we really documented all the migratory birds flying in from the seasons and really showing how these communities have been living in these floating houses. And also, of course, the amazing different endemic wildlife as well, as like the slivery kingfisher and the Mindanao hornbill that actually lives in the peat swamp forest there. So it's a really large wetland that encompasses about 6 municipalities in the Philippines, and it's found in the heart of the southern region in Mindanao. And I guess really, I think the journey or being a photographer is really documenting not just the beauty of nature or, but also the issues that are intertwined, such as the droughts that have been occurring because of the climate crisis, where the peatlands have been burning, and of course the palm oil plantations that have been destroying the homes and the nests of these migratory birds, and affecting also the Manobo tribe, the indigenous community. And I think that's really all about, telling stories and how we can actually make an impact with the environment. And as a young person, I guess it's really a privilege to be an honor to be able to work with amazing organizations like the Peel Harvey Catchment Council and all the other organizations around the world to really conserve our wetlands, including the Ramsar and many more organizations. So thank you so much, and it's such a privilege and honor to be here.
Thank you so much, Gabe. Those photos really spoke volumes, and thank you for sharing us with us. Our next presenter, who's also doing amazing work, is Vandandorj Sumiya. Vandandorj is an ecologist. He has a bachelor and master's degree from the National University of Mongolia. Hello to Mongolia. He started his research career from the Institute of Meteorology, Hydrology and Environment in Mongolia. He continued his study at the University of New South Wales in Sydney under the prestigious Australian Government Scholarship Australia Awards for his second master's degree in climate change and ecosystem services. He then went back to Mongolia and he joined the Wildlife Science and Conservation Centre of Mongolia. And he was selected as a research fellow at the Leiden Conservation Foundation in 2017. Now, since then, he's been coordinating wetland research and conservation projects in different valleys in the northeastern area of Mongolia. And this is a core breeding habitat for vulnerable species, particularly the white-necked crane. He has also a wide range of research experience, from arid land to wetlands, and also such a lot in climate change. He's been the lead author on 4 research articles in international peer-reviewed scientific journals. You see, he brings a huge range not only of academic experience, but on-ground experience. Please give a warm welcome to our presenter from Mongolia.
Thank you very much for having me tonight, and I'm so excited to be here to be part of this event. So, because I also once studied in Australia, in Sydney, under the Australian government scholarship. So I'm very happy to get connected to Australia once again. And today I would like to give a short talk, a very short talk on what I'm doing in terms of wetland conservation and research. So I'm going to share my screen. Okay. Okay, so today I would like to just briefly go through the wetland research and conservation activities in some of the East Asia, Australasian flyway sites in Mongolia. So the first site would be Horch and Huiten River Valley in northeastern Mongolia, which is one of the Ramsar sites and also East Asia Australasian Flyway network site. It is also a core breeding site for white-necked crane, which is a vulnerable species by IUCN, with about 7,000 individuals left in the wild in two populations. The western population is in Mongolia. We have like about 1,500 individuals in this flyway. So in this population. So as you can see on this map, our managing wetland is a very crucial ecosystem or habitat for them to breed. Those locations, pink locations, show their nesting location. So which makes this Hoorn-Hutten wetland to be the most densely breeding habitat for this species. So for this wetland, it's a very unique ecosystem with some permafrost and peat. Because permafrost holds the water close to ground surface, so therefore we have wet ecosystem here. And the peatland also protect this permafrost from degradation. So this is everything is pretty much interconnected with each other. So we are doing a lot of scientific studies on those river valleys, two river valleys. The one highlight from our study is the grazing, because the livestock grazing is the main challenge for this for our wetland, because in summer season the grazed wetland has a very high temperature than ungrazed areas. So it is so therefore livestock grazing can increase, the degradation of permafrost, therefore wetland loss. So therefore that's why we are working with the local community, because a local herder community relying on their livestock in terms of income source. So that's why we are trying to diversify their income source, doing various workshops. For example, here we did a training for local female herders to make felt products and handcrafts out of dirty sheep wool. And then we are also helping them to sell those products in an international market. And then in order to increase public awareness on cranes and wetlands, we do an annual festival, Crane Festival. During this event, we also share our scientific findings with the local community, and then there are also a lot of sports tournaments happening as well. So our organization also runs several research bird ringing stations. So I want to just highlight this Dargang bird ringing station, because this station, in this station, we ring shorebirds. So they are fly to Australia. I think they are on their way to Australia. So this is also one of the East Asia Australasian flyway site, Bang Lake. So I'm not an ornithologist, but I get involved in with this work because our organization runs this ringing station. So I'm just walking here with holding an axe. So if in this station, we do bird ringing for passerine and also waders. So here I just showed the list of some frequently ringed wader species here. And then also if you spot one of those birds that we have been ringing, they have a metal ring on left leg, and the green and blue flag with 3 digits on right leg. So if you sight one of those individuals, please inform us by following social media page. And also you are welcome to do volunteering in our stations. So those are the some photos of the station that we have ringed with the color flag. So we also preparing for the World Migratory Bird Day for this year, as like we did in back 2019. So thank you very much. While I also visited Perth, so it was a very wonderful city. Thank you very much. Okay.
Well, Alaska, the Philippines, Mongolia. So now we've got time. What a treat to have these wonderful presenters doing so much, connecting us through these birds internationally. So thank you so much for your presentations. We would be delighted if we could just have some questions. If anybody initially has a question, well, perhaps I could start off. Could you tell us, you've done so much, each of you, why do you love these wetlands and what inspired you to get involved in this? Sara, do you want to start off for us?
Sure thing. You know, I grew up by wetlands out on Long Island in New York, and I think it's just such an ingrained part of who I am, is seeing all these birds come every year. You know, it's just such a reminder of like a beacon of hope, really, when you see them come in, and they're such a special place. And since I've been living in Alaska, I used to live out in Bristol Bay, which was a small bush village. It was only accessible by plane, and it's in kind of like just a major migratory path as birds are going north. And just being out in the tundra and seeing just like thousands of swans fly over me at a time, it's just probably one of the most magical places, just to be out in the tundra and the wetlands out there and seeing just the amazing amount of life that's in these spots. So many people, especially with Arctic Refuge, think that there's no life up there. They just think it's empty, there's nothing there. And it's actually one of the most vibrant and full of life places I have ever experienced. I mean, there, like I had mentioned earlier, there's over 200 bird species that come there specifically to breed and then move on to the other parts of the world. And that one space connects wetlands from internationally. I mean, there's likely birds that are, you know, just on their way to where you guys are, that maybe I have seen over the summer. And just that notion alone makes me realize how important and special these wetlands are, not only just for the birds, but for our connection across the world.
Oh, thank you. And Gab, what about for you? What inspired you to get involved in this work?
Well, I grew up in the Philippines, so it's like 7,600 islands. So you have inland and inland and coastal wetlands all over. And growing up, I would always spend my time in rivers, in the marshes here near the city, because I right now I'm based in Manila, and actually Manila is based also from a plant. The name Manila came from a wetland growing plant called Maynilad, which is a marsh endemic plant found only in the wetlands here. And it's pretty interesting of like growing up, it really inspired me in a way because I saw really the changes happening in the wetlands that we have. There's a lot of palma plantations happening. There's a lot of draining, and as well as hydropower dams that have been changing the courses of the rivers where I grew up or going here around Manila in the Philippines. And that really kind of made me realize how the cities where the Philippines have been built on are all in wetlands, and you know there's issues of flooding, typhoons, and these are real lived experiences and stories that I've been growing up into my childhood and also until now that we experienced, especially last year, where like one of the major 100-year storm that affected the whole Cagayan River, that affected thousands and thousands of lives in the Philippines. And I think it's a reality for me to see the threats happening in the wetlands, and also the migratory birds of the biodiversity loss happening. And I think someone needed to do something, because not a lot of people here are really, or not a lot of young people are aware of what wetlands are, or like the significance of migratory birds or biodiversity. And I think it's really been my inspiration to really build this community and network and organization to really push for that advocacy, to make sure, you know, the young Filipinos are aware about protecting and conserving the wetlands, and you know the migratory birds, and even the indigenous communities and people who live in these places. So I think that's really the inspiration that, you know, pushed me in telling more stories and documenting and really lobbying for the protection of our wetlands here.
And Vandandorj, what about you in a very different country again in Mongolia? What inspired you to get involved in this work?
Yeah, I also grew up in a very remote area in Mongolia, and there we have many rivers. Used to have many rivers, and then I used to swim there, and then all day spend all days playing outside nearby rivers. But nowadays, there are rivers are getting small streams are shrinking, drying up, and lakes are drying up. But and then after, when I was in Australia, I did my research on dry land, but suddenly when I back to Mongolia, I found out that our wetlands are dried up in half. We have a 2% of wetland in terms in Mongolia, but now we have only 1% of our country's territory is wetlands. So we just lost half of it. And then also we lost our half of permafrost, which makes our country very dry. And then I also found out that there are not many people working on this field, wetland study. So that's why I jumped in it and joined this institution. So wetland is a very crucial ecosystem, which provides habitat for many biodiversity, and then it's also a very productive ecosystem. So it's the source of life. So that's why I fell in love with wetlands, even though it's very harsh in the winter, to do my field study, it's very difficult to get access to the wetland peatland. It's very muddy. We get stuck many times a day to reach our sites. But yeah, we are trying to understand how this ecosystem is working and then how this is changing. So that's the most important part of this. So after, to save those ecosystems, we have to act now. But there are not many people working in this field in Mongolia. So that's, I think, what I have to do, because there is a gap.
Oh, thank you so much. Now, I'm just going to ask our audience who are riveted, and I'd like to we can get a microphone, if we could, to Professor Lynn Beasley down the back.
They should be able to hear.
Oh, could be able to hear. I'd like to introduce you to a former chief scientist in Western Australia, Professor Lynn Beasley, who's going to ask a question.
First of all, I hope you can hear me. Thank you from a very appreciative audience. It's absolutely wonderful to hear from the three of you. You're all great science communicators. I wanted to quote from another of the world's great science communicators, Sir David Attenborough, who said, "Every child loves nature." How do we engage young people best, do you think? Because they're the future generations who will have to love and protect our wetlands.
So anybody, any three of you or all of you can answer that question for Professor Beasley. Over to you. Don't be shy.
I can jump in with that because I work very closely with youth. So there's a few challenges that we have, especially at Arctic Refuge, is that it's so remote. How do you get a space that no one may never get to in their entire life, exposed to the rest of the world? How do we make people care, especially the younger generation, because they're the future? So what we have been doing is we've done a virtual Arctic Bird Fest. So we do it all online, and we hit very specific social media channels and kind of just blast this entire week of all of the research we've been doing, all of the field camps, and giving the world kind of a closer look into what's happening at Arctic Refuge. And I could even, at the end of this talk, I can show you some of the examples that we've been using. Another thing that we really work on doing is engaging local youth. So Alaska has a huge indigenous population, and on Arctic Refuge alone, we have two cultures, the Gwich'in and the Inupiaq people. And so what we have been doing is establishing science and culture camps. So we bring in biologists, avian biologists, and then we also work with local elders. So they will teach the traditional ecological knowledge of the area, and then we will have our biologists kind of teach about some of the westernized science between it. So we combine both of it, and then the students in the villages can kind of get an understanding of what it means to be a researcher, to care about these birds. It's interesting because this is their backyard. This is what they've grown up with. So how do you make something like that exciting and special to youth? And these camps have been really, really successful. We do 2 of them each summer. One actually in the field, we go out to a remote camp and we bring the kids with us, we fly them in, and then another one in the classroom later on. So we've gotten creative with how to get youth involved in this remote place. Another way we get them involved too is with our Canning River Bird Camp. We select 4 or 5 different interns from across the country to come and just experience it for about 6 weeks to understand what this is like. And then part of what they do is that they have to go back to, usually they're in school somewhere, and kind of present on these experiences to kind of garner more interest in this really remote space. And in some ways, COVID really enhanced the fact that we live in this kind of digital realm, and we've been thinking of ways of how to have this immersive experience digitally. And that's a lot of where I come in, where I produce like soundscapes and like audio visual stuff on these social media platforms to kind of get the youth involved in it. And it's been really successful. In our last Arctic Bird Fest, we reached over 1 million people. So those are just some of the few ways that we've been doing it in that remote corner of the world.
Thank you. So, Gab, would you like to follow on from that question about engaging young people?
Yeah, I think that's really also the work that we've been doing with Youth Engage in Wetlands. So even like having this Youth Engage in Wetlands, which is recognized by the Ramsar Convention on Wetlands, so the largest intergovernmental treaty for the wetlands, is really a big step in giving the youth a voting power. So one of the projects or main projects that we're doing is actually creating a resolution to lobby to the contracting parties in different countries that, you know, the youth can have a decision making power in these governmental treaties that were happening. Because it's true, you know, the youth has a powerful voice, and it's really about the community that we're building and making sure that each and everyone is represented well, and that, you know, we're inclusive with a diversity, including disempowered people, indigenous communities, even like the LGBT. And one of the projects that we actually recently done is called the Flyway Youth Forum. So it's a forum, an international forum, regional forum, where we have the flyway paths, the migratory flyway paths. And what we do is we connect and create this whole capacity building projects for different youth leaders around, for example, last year we did one for the East Asian Australasian Flyway. So we had representatives from Japan. Actually, Vandandorj actually gave a talk in the workshop on the forum that we had. We even had keynote speakers like Dr. Jane Goodall, and making sure the youth is very inspired in protecting and conserving nature. And last month, actually, we just concluded the East Atlantic Flyway Youth Forum. So we had people all the way from the Scandinavian region, or all the way to the Arctic, down to the African coast, the Southern African coast. And we had youth leaders representing from different countries around the world, and connecting and gathering and building ideas, creating projects, future projects. And I think also one note to add in really engaging the youth is giving them the resources or the opportunities to be able to create and develop their projects, because, you know, the youth are as Sara has also mentioned, you know, we're digitally connected. We have a lot of information all around us. The young people are very connected to social media, and it's just that not a lot of people who have the resources are investing on this community or this sector that represents a lot of the global population. That we need to keep working, because there's a lot of ideas, new platforms, new amazing technology that the youth can do. And it's just the availability of resources and opportunities to make sure they're working together, collaborating within different regions is a super important thing to take in. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Thank you, Gab. And then, very different, you've described conditions in Mongolia. What's your strategy for this youth engagement?
Mm-hmm. Okay, so I think children are great power to influence people to adapt. Are you hearing me okay?
Yes,
Yeah, okay.
yes.
Yeah, yeah. I think children are a very great power to influence their parents, and then also they will be living in the future in our society. So they are the great power because in some cases, children are doing so well. They are very well to understand, receive new knowledge. So, and then we are in our station, we do a lot of training for local students. We bring local students to our research camp and bring them to, we do a lot of interactive summer school with the local students, and we bring them to a field and they do bird watching with our ornithologist, and then I bring them to the rivers, and then we catch water aquatic insects, and then they can identify themselves by the booklets that we have handed them over. So, and then that way they understand very well, and then also better than do very well and better than their parents in terms of the loving the nature, because they easily understand the importance of wetland and then biodiversity, because and then we also tell them those things will depend on what you are doing, what we are doing. So the students are very good audience and good way to influence their parents. So that's what we are doing in our station. Also, we try to distribute or tell them our research finding in easy ways, so they can get understanding about the whole ecosystem and what's going on in their local wetland. So that's what we are doing in our station.
So, had some great ideas there. Any questions from the room that anybody would like to ask? I'd like to introduce Bob Pond. Bob's on the board of the Peel Harvey Catchment Council. He's also been extensively involved in managing the waterways in this region. Over to you, Bob.
I don't know if you can hear me from here, but I'll shout. I'd like to know, they're doing things that benefit us down here by maintaining their parts of the flyway. What would they like us to do for them?
So that's the question. What would you like us to do for you, Sarah? Easy question.
Oh boy. Well, so many things. I think it would be, something we're trying to do with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service is like really try to connect with partners internationally. So I think even having this conversation is really wonderful because we actually get to, see each other, and we're across the world. I mean, you can see behind me, it's quite dark outside. So just the fact that we're able to kind of like create this branch across the world establishes the lines of communication to be able to get a lot of this knowledge out, especially about wetlands. And so what I personally would love is to kind of move forward in the future and work together, kind of talking about how the birds in the wetlands of the Arctic make their way to where your wetlands are that you manage, and how that brings the world together. I think that would be something that's really, really special to kind of discover and just see what that relationship would look like, connecting people from all over the world.
Oh, well done, Gab.
Yeah, I think this is really an amazing start already, an initiative that we have, different people from the Flyway, and just having this casual conversation and discussions that we generally didn't have before. And I think going further, hopefully after the pandemic, we would be able to, create partnerships, collaborations, and projects together in a way that involves young people as well as intergenerational, dialogues with the Peel Harvey Catchment Council, as well as other organizations all around. Because I realized also that, you know, we have so many different as well organizations and institutions revolving around the wetlands in the East Asian Flyway, or, you know, all the other flyways out there. But there's really not a lot of collaboration happening. I mean, like, you know, sometimes there's even competition with other conservation organizations, right? And I think this is a real polarizing thing to happen. So really having this, continuing this discussions and continuing these discussions, hopefully in the future when we're can meet in person and, you know, start capacity building projects with the youth, with the scientists, chief scientists, and other organizations would be really, really amazing.
Yeah, thank you. And Vandandorj, what's your view on this? What can we do that might help and support the work you're doing?
Yeah, as I mentioned during my presentation, you can send if you cite those words that we have, you know, ringed, you can let us know. Then that way we can get connected and how they are migrating, where they are going, and so this is what we are trying doing. So, and then also you can come to Mongolia to do volunteering or by yourself, or there's also a government a volunteering program, Australian government volunteering program, and then you can come with that volunteering program to Mongolia to work with us or to educate our Mongolian young students, young children, and then you can do your helping hand. You can give your helping hand with us.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. Any other questions from the room? Comments, thoughts? I'd like to introduce the chairperson of the Peel Harvey Catchment Council, councillor, also a local government councillor and deputy mayor of this city, also a medical scientist in her own right, Councillor Carolyn Knight. Carolyn, over to you.
Thank you very much. It's wonderful to be here, and it's really wonderful for you to share your time with us this evening. It is a special weekend where we celebrate the migratory birds, and I'm just wondering how you're celebrating in your different regions this special day. What would be a special weekend?
Yes, thank you. Sarah, do you want to start us off again? How are you celebrating up there in Alaska?
Sure. So at this time of year, there's, you know, about a foot of snow outside, so the birds have left. But it's the days are starting to get shorter and shorter. But what we do is kind of what I mentioned with Arctic Bird Fest, and I can actually I'll share my screen to just show you the flyer that we created for this. Let's see, here we go. Can you see that?
Yes, got it now. Yep.
Yeah, so this is something that we do usually every November, and we work with partners in the lower 48 area. That's what we call the contiguous states in Alaska here. This one's in November, but we're actually doing one this upcoming week because we wanted to tie it into World Migratory Bird Day. So this is a flyer from last year. And what we did with this is we were aiming to kind of engage more youth in this, as we were talking about. So we made it a virtual theme, like a throwback video game theme. And I created these images here. We have a black-bellied plover, a cackling goose, a red-necked phalarope. And this is one of the things that we are starting to do every year around World Migratory Bird Day, to get youth involved in it and kind of make it fun. And another thing that we are doing, hold on, I'm going to stop sharing my screen there and then show you another one. Window. So this is the all Flyways graphic that I designed as the World Migratory Bird Day artist this year. And so we're celebrating just locally, but also internationally too. So we're having like a big signing for families and everyone to come and talk about these birds and like which birds are living on Arctic Refuge. Do they migrate to any of these other places in the world? What are these really interesting birds? So it's a whole programming thing that we do because we don't have the birds out right now. In May, however, we do a lot of in-person celebrations because the birds are just coming in by the droves. But this time of year, we do it all virtually because it's cold and the darkness is coming. And these are just some of the things that we have been creative about doing.
Great, thank you. And what about in your area in the Philippines? How are you celebrating it?
Yeah, actually, it's already the season of the migratory season going here in the Philippines from September until the February, coming from Russia, Arctic region, all the way down here in the Philippines. And I've been actually on the field right now, and I've been a whole week, the past few weeks, I've been documenting a lot of the water and wetlands we had. So actually, a few days ago, we were documenting in an active volcano lake here that recently erupted and affected a lot of communities 2 years ago, almost 2 years ago. And now we're just documenting the livelihoods of these communities, how they're gaining back their wetland or the volcanic wetland lake, and where the migratory birds are actually coming in. So hopefully the story will be out soon, and hopefully you can share it to everyone around here.
Yeah, fantastic. And in a very different landscape, Vandandorj, what sort of celebrations will be happening in your part of the world?
Okay, yeah, in the upcoming week, we are going to celebrate the World Migratory in all three bird ringing stations that we are managing, running. And so I will be visiting one of our bird ringing station, northeastern Mongolia. So we will be gathering there and then giving giving a lecture to local community. And we will also meeting with the local stakeholder to conserve the wetland for those migratory species, because those our bird ringing stations are the very important bird migratory stopover sites, bird stopover sites. So we are trying to protect them in with the local community. So we are celebrating the World Migratory Bird Day in all those bird ringing stations. Yeah.
Oh, thank you. Thanks very much for those thoughts. Any other questions or comments anybody would like to make? Yes, can we go to you, Graham? If you'd like to introduce yourself and then go from there.
Just addressing to all of you, you'd be aware that there's been massive changes to the migratory shorebird habitat in the South China Sea. I'm wondering how that's impacted on the birds that you would normally see and what you think the future holds.
Anybody can take the question.
Yeah, I can jump in on that. So I don't think we have a whole lot of data specifically of what to directly connect what's happening in China versus what's happening in the Arctic. But we are seeing really significant changes in climate, probably faster than any other place on the Earth. The vegetation that used to be at higher altitudes is starting to kind of go away and change, and that will eventually change these nesting and breeding grounds for the birds there. And it's happening at kind of an alarming rate in the Arctic, and it's something that we are really trying to talk about more. And that's why we have this research camp up there to kind of see the trends over the years of these nesting habitats and breeding habitats of the birds. We do have location transmitters on some of them. A lot of what we do though is nest cams, and we're taking the temperature of the nests and seeing how that is changing, and it is changing, and it's changing fast. So I would be interested to see what happens in the next 5 years if climate change does keep progressing at the rate it is progressing, and will some of these birds in other areas of the world, will some of these just completely disappear and not come up to Arctic Refuge? How is that going to affect the ecosystem up there? So much of the future is just a giant question mark in terms of what climate change is going to do. But I think the number one thing that we can talk about as a fact is that it is occurring, and occurring quickly.
Give their observations of what they feel is happening in the South China Sea.
In terms of research here in the Philippines, there's not really any correlation yet with the migratory birds related to the geopolitical conflict that we're having actually in the South China Sea. As you know, we're just really beside it, and we actually call it the West Philippine Sea on our end because there's a lot of political tension happening there. But recently, actually, the project that we did for National Geographic, wherein we published for World Wetlands Day last year in 2020, one of the research we've documented and we've noted from the waterbird census that we've been doing in the park since 2014 that there's been like 11% decrease in the past year of this number of species, opposed from like we had around 20,000 in 2019, and now it's getting lower until in 2020 we were only able to record about 17,000 different species of birds, and I think one of the main drivers of this was actually the droughts that have been happening here and in the wetlands, where they have been having less and fewer feeding grounds in the Agusan marshlands. But there's really a relationship between the effects of climate crisis and the climate change in the Agusan marshlands, and the science has not been lying, and it's really decreasing right now. The trend has been decreasing.
Yes, thank you. Vandandorj, did you wish to comment?
Okay, sure. I'm actually not an ornithologist and not doing a study on ornithology directly, but our ornithologists, we have about 10 ornithologists in our NGO. They are doing a lot of studies for the birds, and as I can tell that the habitat, the wetland that I'm working on has changed a lot in the past several decades, because we used to have two similar wetland river valleys, but now one of those have dried up and then lost its permafrost, and then so that's why the birds from the white-necked cranes used to nest at that valley has shifted to another river valley. So now we have one relatively pristine wetland, but if we lost that one, and then I don't know whether there will be white-necked cranes in those two valleys. Yeah.
Final questions anybody would like to put? Could we just round off, I suppose? Thank you for sharing so much of your experience. And I guess you've certainly inspired us with the things that you're doing. We're also very aware of the great challenges and threats. But would you like to finish off with a comment about something that you might hope for the future in both in your local area and globally, given that there's so much global focus now on the coming climate change talks? Do you want to just finish off with some remarks that you might think what you're hoping for? Can we start again with you, please, Sara?
Sure. I think the biggest thing for me is I think the world is a frog in slow boiling water when it comes to climate change. And I think especially people in the United States, the crazy weather is starting to become normal, so they don't view it as something that's changing. And it is affecting so many parts of life in Alaska. When you're at the tops and bottom of the world, the stuff happens at a really fast and alarming rate. And it's affecting our daily lives. I mean, we are ruled by the seasons in Alaska. And when those start to change, then everything it's a domino effect. Everything starts to change really significantly. And I consistently try to tell people how real this is affecting the environment up here. Obviously, we have issues at Arctic Refuge in terms of oil and gas drilling and exploration. And some of those proposed areas are right where some of these nesting grounds are, and the nesting grounds, as I said, are changing because of climate change and are moving more towards where these potential drilling places would be. And this is just a direct effect of how this one space in the corner of the world affects the entire world that these birds travel to. So if something happens in the Arctic because of climate change, it could affect where you all live. And I think just getting that message out that this is our future. This is something that we need to just learn to deal with and talk about and come up with collaborative solutions, because this is something that we need to stop thinking about as something that's like, oh, it's going to happen. It is happening right now, and it's happening quickly, and we owe it to our children to actively work on that right now.
Yes, thank you very much. Gab, what do you hope for?
I guess, you know, if there's anything to really hope for is that we get acting, because I really believe that there's no hope if there's no action coming from our institutions, our systems, all these different, you know, stakeholders, key stakeholders that have been causing, I guess, the biodiversity loss, or, you know, climate crisis and all these environmental issues that we're facing. And I just do hope, you know, that the future generations would really be given the opportunities to be to take lead and take, you know, to further step up in their and let their voices be heard. And also, you know, this empowered communities. I think it's really an important time where we all, you know, set aside differences or really acknowledge the mistakes that we've done, and really to restore and repair these relationships that we have intergenerationally. And hopefully that we can all, you know, collaborate and develop in conserving wetlands and, you know, migratory birds, and most of all, you know, human lives and people who are affected disproportionately by the climate crisis. So I think that's really my hope, that we can act all together.
Thank you. And Vandandorj, last word to you. What do you hope for?
Yeah, for me, my background is, you know, it's a very academic. I do a lot of research, but scientists need to come up and need to share their findings about what they are doing in terms of climate change. And so actually we are doing a lot of academic studies in our sites, but now we are trying to publish it in an international journals. But apart from that, publishing it in an international journals, we have to also speak to public, and then we have to give what's going on in those ecosystems and what's happening and what's probably will happen in the future. So that way people will get a very good understanding, and then they will be also helping with us to save those ecosystems and from, you know, reduce the effect of climate change in the future. Yeah.
Thank you so much. We'll draw the webinar to a close now, but I think I'd be reflecting the views of all the people here. You can hear a pin drop. People have been so absorbed. We've been inspired by you. We've been connected to you. We've been challenged. We've been informed. It's just been the most wonderful experience for us to really hear what you're doing, to see that you continue to address the challenges, but find ways of engaging and connecting your communities. It's been a genuine privilege for us, and I think the remarks that were made earlier about having this connection through the birds, through the flyways, I know is something that we will continue. We're very proud to stand with you around this issue, and I know that we will continue to collaborate. Thank you most sincerely for sharing your knowledge, your insights, and also educating us about what is happening in your part of the world. We hope this will be the beginning of many discussions, because this kind of dialogue, I think, also encourages us to keep going, to make sure that on our watch these terrible things don't happen, and that we can work together to make things a lot better. Could you please join me in thanking these three wonderful young people?